You're watching Fugitive Red-Eye, and welcome to another exciting episode of Nostalgic Gaming Stories, which, as the title implies, is a series about me talking about gaming experiences that give me severe nostalgia. I love the Elder Scrolls series of games. Every single one I've played has been pretty decent. I'm not the biggest fan of Elder Scrolls Online, but I loved Morrowind, Oblivion, and Skyrim. Now, I've never played Daggerfall, Battlespire, Arena, Redguard, Shadowkey, or any of those other ones. But Morrowind, which is the one I will be primarily talking about today, is the one that got me into that series, and I played it a little bit differently than you're supposed to. If there is a right way to play an Elder Scrolls game, I do think that is part of the charm, as you can play it however you want. I will say this though, to this day, I have never beaten Morrowind, nor have I beaten Oblivion. The only Elder Scrolls game I have actually completed the main quest is Skyrim. But Morrowind was a very different experience than Skyrim or even Oblivion, and it was much different than its predecessors. It actually revolutionized the battle system as compared to what it used to have originally. In fact, Morrowind revolutionized the fighting system for RPGs to come as well. Rather than having a turn-based system, instead it lets you just attack as you please. Now, initially when I played it, I did have my gripes with it. For instance, the hit detection is kind of shit when you compare it to modern games. And if you run out of stamina, your hits hit even less. The only way to have really solid hit detection is if you're an orc and you use the Berserk power. It makes it so that most of your hits hit. Now, of course, one of the first things you always end up doing in Morrowind is stealing shit, because it's fun. And the first weapon you get is a dagger you swipe off a table in a guard's quarter. That's if you take it, which I recommend, but at the same time you don't need to, because you can get another sword pretty easy. Because as soon as you walk out into the woods, there's a guy that actually falls from the sky, giving you a pretty powerful sword for the first little while. But another thing I used to frequently do on Morrowind was just go around killing a bunch of random people. I'd build up a gigantic bounty on my head, and then sometimes go to the Thieves Guild and pay it off. Interesting side note about that, the Thieves Guild in the vanilla version of Morrowind, if you drop all your gold and then you go to the Thieves Guild, you can get your bounty removed for free. However, if you have the Game of the Year edition or the PC version, then you can't, because it's been patched on the PC and Game of the Year versions. But in the original Xbox version that's pre-patch, you can get your bounty removed for free. But anyway, I'd rack up this bounty, and sometimes you'd get what's called a death warrant on your head, which means that you can't go to jail or pay gold at all. And as a kid, I thought the guards were invincible because they were really hard to kill, or at least I thought they were. However, then one day, Super Dantastic, who played it a lot with me as a kid as well, and he wiped out the entire town of Nessus by killing all of the guards, all of the people, everything. Then he moved on to Vivek and killed the High Ordinator and took his armor, which I didn't even know you could do. Because as I said at the time, as a kid, I thought that the guards were invincible. Of course, the more we played it, the more we realized that was not true, and we'd become more and more notorious outlaws. No one would let us travel anywhere, so we had to travel completely by foot, or we'd have to bribe them with gold. Everywhere we went, the guards attacked us, and we had to fight back. And at the time, I thought it was the quickest way to level up. However, I figured out it is much easier to level up if you're not an outlaw, and you just focus on upgrading your skills. When I played Morrowind as a kid, I never completed the main quest, or even really attempted it. Unlike its predecessors, you can actually kill people important to the main quest and continue playing. It does give you a warning telling you that you've doomed the world and to load a save or continue in the doomed world you've created. But at the time I didn't care because I never focused on the main quest. I always role-played my own missions, which is something I did frequently as a kid with pretty much every video game. Sometimes when I played, the reason I killed the guards was claiming, that I was some sort of revolutionary and the guards were corrupt. Other times I did it just for the sure hell of it. Another thing I did as a kid in Morrowind was I was obsessed with trying to find the vampires, and I was convinced for whatever reason they were at Ghostgate. Although I later discovered they're actually inside shrines along the path all over the place. Then, of course, later on when I got the Game of the Year edition, I became obsessed with becoming a werewolf, which is incredibly difficult to do, and I still haven't done to this day. Whereas with Skyrim, becoming a werewolf was one of the first things I did. And up until recently, I had never been able to get into Mournhold because I was always an outlaw, although recently, just last year, I actually was first able to do it for my first time. Incidentally, if you do get the Game of the Year edition and you get to Mournhold, give the beggar money, or be prepared for one of the most annoying fights in the game. Only way I could defeat him was by going and getting Umbra, and then fighting him with that. And fighting Umbra was hard enough as it is, but then fighting this guy was much, much harder. Another thing that definitely came in handy through Morrowind is later on, as I kept playing it, I learned cheats to regain health, regain stamina, and regain fatigue. Which I memorized by remembering songs from Zelda Ocarina of Time, believe it or not. For instance, the health cheat is black, white, black, 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 A. The Magicka cheat is black, white, white, black, A. And the stamina cheat is black, white, black, white, A. Stupid little things like that helped me remember them so that I still remember them to this day. Also, once you hit a certain level, there's all sorts of diseased animals all over the fucking place, so if you don't want to deal with that, I recommend you use the fast travel systems, which of course are nowhere near compared to what the fast travel systems are in Oblivion or Skyrim. Instead, you have to go to a silt strider, a boat, or I think those are really the only two options. No, there's also mages can teleport you. I also became obsessed with wearing different types of guard armor. In this little roleplay thing I did, sometimes I like to pretend I blended in with the guards even though they were obviously still attacking me. But other times, they don't attack you, and a lot of the times, the guards don't even come after you unless you report yourself to them. For instance, if you kill a bunch of people, they don't always come after you right away. However, if you run up and talk to them, a lot of the times they'll be like, hey, you're a criminal, but if you don't talk to them, you're fine. Again, the problem with that is if you want to get to Mournhold with the Game of the Year edition, you cannot be an outlaw because you have to report you're being attacked by the Dark Brotherhood to a guard. And if you have a death warrant, there's no way to remove the bounty unless you have unless you're in the Thieves Guild and you have a fuck ton of gold and you haven't killed any Thieves Guild members. Because if you kill Thieves Guild members, you cannot remove the bounty until you make amends with the Thieves Guild, which is a pain in the ass in and of itself. However, if you want to complete the Fighters Guild questline, I feel like you do kind of have to kill one of the Thieves Guild members in order to get the book that you're supposed to give to the Fighters Guild. Anyway, Morrowind was an expansive and fun world and a great game to play. It's one of the most nostalgic video games I've played. I remember the first time I played it, my brother actually brought it home because a friend of his let him borrow it at school, and that's when we first played it, and we became obsessed, so then we later got a copy of our own. And then even further down the line, we got a copy of Game of the Year edition. I remember I had multiple saves with multiple characters on Morrowind that represented different members in my own faction I had made up. And back in the days of Morrowind, I always played as an orc, but then as I got older, I played as Imperials a lot more. Morrowind is one of those games that I never get tired of, and I honestly feel in some ways it's my favorite of the Elder Scrolls series, whereas in some ways Skyrim is. It does depend on my mood as well. Morrowind is a much more difficult game. There's no indicators to tell you where to go other than the clues people give you, and the journal is a lot less well organized than it is in the later games. And if you're only playing on the original Morrowind, there's actually no health bars for your enemies to tell you if you're even hurting them, whereas in the Game of the Year edition, they do have health bars added in. Overall, if you haven't ever played Morrowind and you like the Elder Scrolls in general, I definitely recommend picking up Morrowind for the original Xbox or the computer, either way, because it is a fantastic game, and it was my entry to the Elder Scrolls series, which is one of my favorite gaming series of all time. Anyway, those are my thoughts on Morrowind. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Were you an outlaw in Morrowind? Did you make up your own factions and games? Did you kill a lot of guards? Did you do a lot of nefarious stuff in Morrowind? What did you think of it? Do you prefer Oblivion, Skyrim? Let me know in the comments just in general what you think, and you have a great day.
Subscribe, defeated your red eye.